You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
What is up, good people? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this week. I appreciate you. I just realized something rather strange happened. Last week, I had a British man on this podcast named Marcus Reeves. This week, I am having a British man on the podcast named David Greaves. So, something about the Eves over there in the UK. I don't know. Perhaps Eves-based surnames are more likely to build pedals. I don't know. It's a working theory. I'm still trying to figure it out here. Anyway, this week I'm talking to David Greaves from Great Eastern Effects. I was introduced to David by our mutual friend Joe Branton of the Guitar Nerds podcast, and David had something coming out, and this will be one of the first kind of pre-teasers about it. Joe's done some pre-teasers about it, but we talk about it a little bit more in depth on this episode. I even do a little playing so you can get an idea of what we're talking about, which is, I don't know if I've ever done that myself. Guests have played stuff, but I don't think I ever actually have. So, podcast first. Look at that. All right, let's get into this episode with David so you can get on with your life. Let's do it. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, a show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have David Greaves from Great Eastern Effects. What's going on, dude?
Hey, it's good, yeah. Busy.
Yeah, you have been busy. Excuse me. We had a chance to chat here a few weeks ago before we did this podcast, and you gave me a little teaser of something that's coming, and we can talk about the products and get into all that stuff, but I really still don't know a lot about you.
Sure.
I think getting your background and how you got started in music and why you started a pedal company, and let's get all the juicy details. Let's start there.
Okay. So originally I was working as a journalist, so I was writing for the first writing job I had was for Sound on Sound magazine here in the UK, which is a studio recording magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, I left university not really knowing what I was going to do, and I met somebody at an open mic night, got chatting about music, talking about pedal steel, and through him I got a job at this music magazine. So I mean, really, my career break was being the only person in my town who owned a pedal steel. They're quite common now, but back then it wasn't really a common instrument to find. And so I'd just got my student loan through. Is this a thing in the US as well? When you go to college, go to university, you can borrow money to pay for it.
Oh, it's a unfortunate thing. Yeah,
sure.
Usually they borrow way too much because they don't know. It's a little bit predatory. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
At least here it is.
So my student loan had just come through, and I went to London to Denmark Street, which is the sort of Music Row famous bit of London, and I saw this pedal steel, and it's the first one I'd ever seen, in the flesh,
mm-hmm.
ever, and so I basically spent a good chunk of my student loan buying this ridiculous thing, and then had to figure out how to get it back home. I didn't have a car or anything like that, but because I had that pedal steel, it was a great way to get into lots of gigs because no one else had one. So you're automatically the best pedal steel player in the region. So I think through that bit of poor financial planning, I ended up getting this job writing for Sound on Sound because the editor was a Neil Young fan. We got talking about Neil Young and pedal steel, and so it's a long way around of saying I really fell into writing about music and about gear, and I found I absolutely loved it, and it was an amazing thing as a young 20-something to be able to pick up the phone and people would take your calls because you work for a magazine, and back then magazines were a thing that was important. And got to go to shows, got to go to NAMM and the big music show they used to do in Frankfurt, Germany. And then I moved on from Sound on Sound to a guitar magazine called Guitar Buyer, which is not around anymore. And I was the editor there for about 4 or 5 years. And through all that time, really, I got to meet so many really brilliant people who were building guitars, building pedals, building amps, and made lots of friends and learned a lot from talking to other people about what they were doing. And then I spent a bit of time away from kind of music industry, just doing other kind of writing jobs. But I really liked the idea of the things these guys are doing. Be able to make that the focus of your working life, to make things that other people would use to make music. And I think I'd kind of got to a point where I didn't want to write about what other people were doing anymore. I wanted to do the thing, and and really the pedal thing was something I fell into just through repairing pedals that I already had. I think I'd always had been able to solder. I learned to do basic electronic stuff at school, and I'd always repaired guitars and changed pickups and things like that. But for whatever reason, I felt like when it would come to pedals or amps, particularly amps, because they could kill you.
Right.
That you can't go any further. You have to stop here. And I had a couple of pedals that the foot switches broke and needed replacing, and I thought, well, I can change a switch on a Stratocaster. I must be able to replace a switch on a foot switch on a pedal. So I ordered the parts and desoldered the old switch, put a new switch in, and it worked. And it was like the penny dropped. It's like, oh, I'm actually allowed to mess with this stuff. I'm allowed to take the back off and mess around, figure out why it works, what will make it better. And just through that, I really got the bug, as so many people do who end up starting pedal companies, for really quickly, as I started to understand how these different circuits work, I started to have ideas about different ways to do things, and as soon as those ideas start kind of paying off, it's incredibly exciting and really sort of motivates you to go further with it. So yeah.
What was the first pedal that you made? I'm imagining before, like, all the branding and everything was in place, there was some other steps along the way between foot switch and fuzz pedal.
Yeah, I think I started off. I made a lot of stuff that that just didn't work. Not in that it there was no sound, but the ideas I had in my head for, like, wow. And people say this to me all the time at trade shows and things, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could have a pedal that was this combined with this, and then I'd press a button and it would do this third thing, and you'd say, like, yeah, that would be great, but that's not that's not possible to do that. And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes that's just not how circuits work and how sounds work. I really wanted to have more control. It's interesting. So just recently I went to the Synth and Pedal Expo show in London, and I came back with a pedal made by Intensive Care Audio called the Vena Cava filter. An amazing pedal. It's like a distortion with a LFO controlled filter with a kind of ring modulator, and it's the kind of pedal that it's sort of almost designed to surprise you, to do stuff you don't expect, which is amazing, and also just totally the opposite of everything I've tried to do. So I want to really be in control and be able to get exactly the sound I want and then get back to playing, and which is, this is why pedals are so fascinating. Why there's so many companies out there. There's so many different ways to approach it, but I think early on I thought I want to be able to control these different aspects of distortion or overdrive. I want to separate these things so I can make them more controllable. And a lot of those early ideas, they just didn't pan out because there's no way to separate those things. That's not how distortion works or overdrive works. But in all those things, you learn so much more when things don't work. So I think I probably was too ambitious early on, but I think you probably learn more if you're willing to persevere with it. When you hit those walls and find that things don't work, and then you've got to find a way around it, or change your plan and come back around.
Do you have an example that stands out to you? Is like, oh, I was trying to make the highs, square waves, and the lows, more soft clipping, or like, is there anything that really stands out from those early attempts?
I think a lot of them ended up being too subtle. And I think this isn't it. I mean, it's an interesting thing as a pedal designer and trying other pedals. It's like a lot of the digital stuff you try. The presets are just mad. They're so over the top because the guys designing it, they know what they're doing. They're part of a commercially successful large company, so they know that if you want to sell the box in the shop, when you press a button, you've got to hear something happen. You've got to hear big differences, and there's lots of stuff I hear that's sort of designed for the showroom. It's way over the top, and it doesn't really sound good. But boys, it's really doing something. And I think that I designed a bunch of pedals that they all sounded good, but it was so subtle. And I gave them to other people, and they were just like, "Yeah, I'm not. This isn't working for me." And I kind of realized that there's sort of a relationship between what the control is called, and what your expectations of it are. And if the control does not deliver what you think it's going to when you move it, then automatically that's a bad experience. So I think there's a lot of making a pedal that really that people really love and really engage with is actually understanding those expectations and building controls and the range of controls and things they do that really deliver on what people expect, and it's a really satisfying thing, rather than feeling as I have often with pedals I've tried. Oh, that's not at all what I thought that would do. Or
right.
Do you know what I mean? When the range is off and yeah,
the range in particular, I think, is something that was more acceptable back in the day, as far as oh, that's not doing anything. Oh, huge volume jump. We as consumers experience that so often that I think, especially when we're buying nicer effects or amps or even guitars, we expect everything to be kind of smooth and work in a consistent way across the the taper of the knob, and that's not always possible depending on what the parameter is, but I think everyone's kind of tired of those weird volume jumps. So like dialing in the range of the controls is definitely something that I think especially the boutique world has done a good job with. It's trickled into the more mainstream, bigger companies as well at this point.
I think that's definitely true. Obviously, like the amazing Vina Cava filter that Intensive Care Audio make, there's always room for pedals that do surprise you and just like do crazy stuff, and that's great. But yeah, I want. The thing that still bugs me is there's stuff that I feel like has bled across from like modding and kind of DIY scene, and the modding thing was super important in the early days of boutique pedals, and lots of people like Robert Keeley, they kind of started out doing amazing mods that made existing pedals sound so much better. But there's things like the clipping switch, which lots of pedals use, that was something that came out of modding, where an easy way to get more sounds out of a pedal was to say, okay, I'll give you another couple of sets of diodes on a switch, and you can flick between LEDs, which have lots of headroom, and silicon diodes, which are sort of in the middle, and germanium diodes, which are have really low headroom and break up really quickly. And so people have got used to this idea. Has this one got a clipping switch? Oh yeah, great. But the thing is, it's really easy to also build in a bit of volume compensation, so that you actually have three useful options at the same volume level, rather than three options at three really different volume levels. And there's stuff like that where I feel like I'd like that to become standard for me, that people just go that little bit extra to make it, because I don't want to. If I change one control, I don't want to have to then adjust all the others to get back to where I was to adjust the volume and gain and everything. I'm really extra fussy about stuff like that, and I want it to be the kind of smoothest possible experience when you're using the pedals.
So what was the first official Great Eastern product when that came out, and you had everything dialed, had the branding dialed, and you're like, okay, I'm really starting a company here. What was that first product, and how did it come out?
Yeah, the pedal I launched with, it's called the Small Speaker Overdrive, which is the idea behind that was thinking about all these amazing records that have been made using a little tweed or blackface champ or a little Gibson J5, or these student model amps that get used a lot in the studio, and you listen to the record and you think it's a big stack and this huge guitar sound, but it's just a little amp with a mic really close in front of it. And there's something really amazing about those amps for studio use, in that the small speaker physically can't reproduce that much low end, and it has a sort of a honky peak in the high mids, and then it rolls off a bit of treble, and it kind of means the engineer doesn't need to touch the EQ on the desk. It just sits the guitar perfectly in the mix. And I was really interested in this idea. I mean, going back to when I was working at Sound and Sound and interviewing producers and learning about some of these little tricks, and I just thought, that would be a great thing to put in a pedal. That sort of EQ signature, and then the other side to those little amps, which is the way that they break up. Little single-ended Class A amp where there's no real jump between clean and overdriven. It's kind of a little bit overdriven all the time, and the louder you play, even just digging in a bit harder with a pick, you get a bit more drive. Mm-hmm. So that I think when I had that idea, and then when I had a circuit that really worked, I thought, yeah, that's something I haven't seen. That's something I've always wanted. That could really work. And I mean, really, the first three pedals I launched, the Small Speaker Overdrive, the Designer Drive, and the Focus Fuzz, I'd kind of designed them all before I started. I wanted to be sure that I had more than one good idea before I quit my job and started a company. And I went with the Small Speaker Overdrive first because I felt like it was, in a way, the oddest idea of the three. I think if I'd launched with something that was much more middle of the road, I would not have got as much attention. So I thought that would probably be the best one to lead with. But actually, I feel like it's still the pedal that kind of connects with people the most, and that people come up and talk to me about at the shows and send me emails about, which is really amazing. But it's probably my favourite pedal of all the ones I've done so far.
Nice.
Yeah.
So where did the Great Eastern come from? I mean, obviously there's a lot of railroad themes that I know are connected, but where did you get the idea for that?
Yeah, there is a Great Eastern Street in Cambridge, as there is in London, lots of other places. And the Great Eastern Railway Company was one of the Victorian 19th century railway companies and it was the one that ran from London to Cambridge, where I live, and out to the East Coast. And I just really like the sound of it. And I think I wanted something that sounded sort of big and established and official. I think from the beginning, I felt very self-conscious about being, another one-man pedal company. I felt like there's so many people doing it so well already. I really want to project this image of being something big and established, rather than being another sort of newcomer. And I think the first time I went to NAMM last year, and speaking to some people I knew from old days, and they were kind of saying, "Oh, so who's your have you got a financial backer? Like, who's doing your design? Who's doing your graphic design? Who's designing the circuits and things?" And I was kind of saying, "Yeah, it's just me." And I thought, was that a mistake? Do you think I would have been better saying it's just me, rather than trying to seem like a big company? But I don't know. It felt like what I wanted to do at the time, to kind of hide my insecurity about putting something out. Because I tell you, I've written for lots of things for magazines. I've written songs. I've performed my own music. All these things, and nothing is as scary as launching the first pedal that I designed and kind of saying to everybody, "Here's this thing. I put a price tag on it. This is good. You should all pay attention to this." That's the most frightening thing I've done in terms of putting something creative out there. And it still is. I'm just about to launch another pedal, and it's always pretty nerve-wracking, waiting to see what people are going to make of it and what people are going to do with it.
It's tough when you're designing and launching products and rebrands and new brands and all that. I've done a lot of that stuff, and it's always like, man, you pour so much time into it. With the Stringjoy rebrand, I think we spent like 4 months just going back and forth on different design elements.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things where I think it's worth it, because in my experience, once you land on the thing, you usually know there's not a lot of like, oh, this is okay, let's just roll with it. If you're really passionate about it and you really are putting a lot of yourself into it, something will come across the desk, like if you're working with a graphic designer or however you're doing it, and it'll all be like, that's it, that's the one.
Yes.
Whether it's the logo or if it's like, oh no, this little element of the box or whatever. And I think a lot of people don't quite realize how much time goes into that side of the stuff when it's done well. Even if things are fairly minimalist and they don't look like a lot of effort necessarily when like, well, you just put a line there. It's like, yeah, but we had to put 47,000 lines in different places to figure out that that's where the line goes.
And then take them back off again.
Yep.
And then put them, yeah.
It's amazing how much brain power goes into these things outside of just trying to make the circuit cool.
Yeah. It's a crazy process. And, I'm lucky that I have met lots of really great people that I can bounce things off and send things to for feedback and get advice. But I think feedback's super important. But I think in the end, it's you who has to believe that it's right and make that final call, isn't it?
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Merits Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X. and all the other fine products at Maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff. Yeah, because as much as you want input and you want to work with everybody, if the committee gets too big and everybody has equal input, it gets pretty stale and bland pretty quickly. You know, there's not very many wonderful pieces of art that I can think of that were fully designed by committee that stand the test of time. You know, yeah. If something's for everybody, it's usually for nobody.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, all the three pedals so far have they've had a sort of a somebody in mind and a problem or a challenge or a use case in mind that I've been trying to meet. But this new pedal is scary because it is pretty new. I don't think it's something anyone's asking for because they don't know that it exists. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I feel like I'm talking myself out of it as I go, but
it's too late. It's too late. You know, I did an episode of Guitar Nerds with Branton here just a couple weeks ago. It'll probably be 3 weeks ago as far as when this episode comes out. And he's like, yeah, the cat's out of the bag already, so let's do something. And so I guess by the time this drops, you might as well tell them about the new pedal and we can discuss it a little more in depth. So what is the new one that's freaking you out a little bit?
It's called the XO variable crossover. And it's as the name suggests, a crossover. So a crossover, though you might not know it, is in your hi-fi speakers, in PA speakers, where you want each speaker to work on a particular frequency range that it can handle in a clean and linear fashion. So you put a big low pass filter to take out the highs and send just the lows to the big speaker, and you use a high pass filter to take out the lows and send just the highs to the high frequency speaker. And then what comes out the other end just presents as a complete signal again, because those two filters are set at the same frequency, or they're set at a frequency that overlaps in the right way. So basically what this pedal does is it uses a crossover to split your input signal into a low frequency band and a high frequency band. And then each of those goes to a different effects send and return loop. And that means that you can basically put different effects on the low frequency portion and the high frequency portion of your guitar or bass. So you can use these one at a time. So if you want to restrict an effect to just a particular frequency range, so I really like putting a big reverb, but just on the low frequencies. So it doesn't get kind of clangy and overpowering, but you get this big, warm, cavernous kind of pad on the lows. Similarly, if you put a delay or a reverb just on the very high frequencies, it goes all kind of shimmery and sparkly, but the rest of your signal's left alone. But you can also use them both at the same time, which is really fun when you get to delay or modulation effects, one on the low frequencies, one on the high frequencies, and then you can mess around with different rates and different sounds, or two different types of drive effect, of fuzz and an overdrive. So a lot of the stuff that I say to people, like, oh yeah, you can put a fuzz on the lows and a chorus on the highs, it sounds really cool, and people just look at me as if to say, I have no idea what that sounds like. That's not something I've ever done, And that's the point of it. It lets you do stuff that previously you weren't really able to do in quite a convenient sort of package. So I should say as well that the center frequency, so the point at which you're splitting what you're calling the low send or what you're calling the high send, you can move that up and down. So it becomes much more useful when you can decide what portion of the signal is going to the lows and what's going to the highs. But I listened to you on Guitar Nerds, and you did a beautiful audio example using the pedal. So why don't you tell me how you found using it?
I mean, as soon as you described it to me on our first phone call, I instantly understood the concept, because I think I told you I've had a few people over the years come to me with a similar idea, not necessarily executed the same way, but nobody actually ever was able to take it over the goal line. Nobody actually ever made the final product. So it wasn't an unfamiliar concept to me at all, though I definitely didn't think of it. But you were the first person to actually take the idea and make it into a functional product that people could use. And so that got me really excited, because I've loved the idea for a long time. And I think this is probably one of the better executed versions of the concept that I've seen, because I've, looked at drawings and I think it's going to work like this. And some of it was digital and some of it was, done in different ways. But this is just a very straightforward, easy to understand version of the concept. And I think that's probably the best place to start. So, it fits in with how I tend to make music too, which is I put a bunch of pedals on the table and split signals. I'll have, certain stereo pedals where oftentimes I start with the center of the board more than the chain running through. So I'll start with a stereo delay. It's stereo in and out. And maybe I'm only using a mono into it and then stereo outs to different pedals going to different amps to do different things. So this allowed me to actually identify, frequency spectrums and impact them the same way. And on that clip, I'll probably take and insert it in here just for reference, because it's short and I already have it done. So why not? But I had that done in about 15 minutes. I set it up. I ran the highs, and it's not all the highs. I kind of had it maybe. It's if you're looking at a sliding scale, I probably had it around 60%, where the highs were going to the 1981 DRV, which is a distortion pedal, and then the lows were going out to the Mr. Black High Five, which is a quote unquote power chord generator. So it puts a fifth and an octave on your note, and you can adjust whether that's a high fifth or a low fifth or whatever, and so you could play a power chord with a single finger, which some people are like, oh, that's cheating. That's stupid. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's not really about making guitar playing easier. It's about now you can play leads as if they were power chords. You can do weird, funky stuff like that is just impossible to do otherwise. And so the lows were going through that. And I sent it, instead of having it summed together, like, I guess we should explain that. You could sum it all together on the output, or you can take those individual chains and run them out stereo, which is what I did on that track. So the end result sounds like multiple guitars doing different things, when really that's all just one take, me playing one riff, just playing along with the drums. It allowed me to make, like, by the time I got done out of the two inputs, running into 4 different cab IRs, it sounds like this huge band. It's just one guitar.
Yeah.
So, and that, like I said, I kind of understood it, from the jump, especially after we talked about it, and I thought, I bet this will work like this if I run this chain, and it worked exactly how I expected it to. So again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, having things work like you anticipate can help the workflow as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's so interesting. I'm really excited about getting this pedal out there, because I think everyone's going to use it a little bit differently. What you've described, I never probably would have thought to use it that way. But because it at the end of the day, it is a set of filters and sends and returns and mixes. It is something you can use in lots of different ways. And this is all stuff that has been possible before. And you could do this with a mixer and a few cables. But I think the really great thing using it about the crossover is that as you move the filter over, but if you're sort of basically low pass filtering one effect, because the two filters are linked, the crossover is linked, the other side moves over at the same time, so you don't have to rebalance everything. It just sort of takes care of itself, and you can just think about the two effects chains and what you want to put there, or you can use this to split the signal and feed different amps, which is pretty cool as well. And I think, for bass players, I think it's really exciting. One bass player friend said to me, it basically means that no guitar effects are off limits now. You can put anything you like on the high frequency send and return, while keeping your lows clean, full. So that I think for bass, it's almost a different sort of scenario. I think guitarists are going to get excited by more complex creative effects chains. I think bass players probably will see just the kind of utility angle of the pedal. But yeah, I fully expect people to come up with stuff that I'm not creative enough to think of, and that's going to be brilliant to see.
Well, what's interesting too is I think it'll also be, if people approach it the right way, it can be educational, because we're used to just running, especially guitarists, we're just running our signals in and out, and maybe we like the result, maybe we don't, but we might not necessarily know why. Maybe it's, I don't like what this distortion does to the highs of my signal. It sounds kind of weird. Maybe it's like a little too aggressive, a little too square. I need something a little rounder on that portion. But wow, it sounds really good on the lows, and it might help provide, honestly, a little bit of a mixing education to people who's never done any mixing or really thought about the frequency range of the instrument that much. I could see, if you're into messing with your sound and sculpting your pedal board and playing around with all this stuff, it being a bit of an educational tool as well, which I don't think was the point. But if you've never messed with the separating frequency ranges before, this is a way you can do that, not in the box, not on a big console, in a very like easy to understand small box that works rather intuitively.
I don't know what the point is. I think sometimes you just have to make these things and then figure out the point later. I mean, I'll talk about how I ended up making it, but I think you're absolutely right, and it is really instructive to listen to the two frequency bands in isolation. Say, oh, that's what's happening in the low end. That's what's happening in the high end. And experimenting with different effects. I don't know if you found this, but it kind of makes you realize that for a lot of overdrives, it's really about the mid range, and really the guitar signal is mostly mid range. That's where most of the meat of it is. But for other effects, for reverb and delay, and for some modulation effects, the edges are really important. What's happening right down at the bottom, what's happening at the top, are much more interesting. And that's another really educational thing in really thinking, instead of thinking about, when you're using effects, you generally think about maybe left and right stereo or kind of wet and dry mix. Actually thinking in terms of frequencies is kind of a new horizon in complicated effects change. But so this pedal, I mean, it came out of me wanting to build a harmonic tremolo. So I don't know if you know, in a harmonic tremolo, there is something like a crossover. At least the signal is split, and there's a low pass filter on one half and a high pass filter on the other, and then those two sides are out of phase, and the action of the tremolo then causes that kind of phase cancellation in the middle, which makes harmonic tremolo sound sort of lovely, swirly, and washy, because of the phasing going on in the middle. And I thought, well, what if I could move that point up and down, so I could change where that the area of phase cancellation was? Would that be interesting if I could have a harmonic tremolo with an extra control that would move the emphasis up and down? So I built one, and it was okay. It wasn't probably interesting enough for the amount of extra complexity required to make it. But I'd already gone to all the time and trouble of figuring out making this crossover, making a crossover where I could move the center frequency up and down, and that was steep, not so steep that it sounded unnatural, and not so shallow that it wasn't separate enough. And I just thought, well, hang on, if I just have this, then I can put anything through it. And if you want to, you can put a tremolo on the low band and tremolo on the high band, and then there's a button to put the two bands out of phase, and you can roll your own harmonic tremolo, which is really fun. And when you start messing around with the rate, changing the rate on the highs, the high band, the low band, so that phase cancellation that's happening in the middle is not happening in a it's happening in a much more kind of random and interesting way. That's really cool. So yeah, it's a harmonic tremolo that got out of hand and has now turned into something else. And yeah, I mean, it's. I'm just hoping that the people you mentioned who didn't end up making this thing don't know something that I don't know, and that it is something worth doing. I think from the reaction I've had from people already, the challenge is really understanding something new and something a little bit complicated. But I think once you get your head around it, people start having their own ideas about how they could use it, and start getting excited about the possibilities. So yeah, I'm excited about it, sure.
It's one of those other things worth noting too is what you're talking about, like listening to things in isolation, but you explain the concept of the crossover in general audio terms, not just this pedal at the beginning. If you listen to the isolated tracks, which just might be kind of a fun video to do later, I don't know, we'll see. But if you listen to the isolated tracks on the track that I made, individually they sound pretty bad. Like they don't sound very good on their own, which I expected, but I, in trying to build this out and kind of construct it again, I did it really quickly. So it happened in about 15 minutes, but in thinking through the process, I knew that I needed to hear the sum of everything before I could fully judge, what it was going to be, because I've done that enough times where you get a full, rich, awesome sounding, tone, you get it recorded and you're like, it doesn't sound, it's not quite doing the thing. And I've told the story a million times, but it's happened a bunch of times at this point where I put like a big, thick, nasty, fuzzy track together. Sounds weak in the mix. I put a nasally, kind of horrible sounding overdub on it and mixed it in a little bit. And it just fills everything out and it sounds wonderful. So knowing that like the individual tracks weren't exactly ideal on their own, but like taking the concept of the crossover, I was like, and once I hit go and listened to everything mixed together, I was like, yeah, this is what I was hoping it would do. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes it's like, nope, This still sounds really bad.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know whether it's because as guitarists, when we're experimenting with our gear and we're trying to dial in sounds that we like, we're usually doing it on our own, and quite often you end up wanting a lot more low end that way, because without it the guitar sounds weird and thin, and but actually in the context of a mix, in the context of a band, you really don't need a lot of that stuff. And often I have a compressor on my board at the moment, which I don't know much about. It was a French company. It's called the Selmo sardine can compressor. It looks like it's in a little sardine tin basically, but it's got a great switch on it. It's just flat and then 2 levels of bass cut, and it's so useful and so interesting that often if I'm playing and I can't really hear myself very well, then actually cutting low end makes my guitar pop out of the band. Whereas you would think, I need to turn that up, I need more power, I need more fullness, and actually that's not always how it works. And it's partly to do with what frequency being masked by other people, and it's partly to do with the way our ears work and the way that we hear things. But yeah, I'm a big believer in kind of cutting lows. It's definitely in a band context, and the bass player is doing all that good stuff for you anyway. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you're playing, you're thinking, oh, my guitar sounds huge, this is great, and then the bass player steps on his cable and it pops out of his bass, and suddenly the bass goes away, and you're like, what happened to my big monster guitar sound? And it was the bass player hammering away on the bottom, and it was the fact that you guys were playing in sync that was making it sound so good. So I think it's so fascinating, isn't it? I think there's so much to learn from engineers and producers and people who understand, or anyone really who has a different perspective on sound and the job of your instrument in the band. There's a lot you can learn from them.
100%.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblissaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
Hi, this is Paul Phelps.
And this is Monica Strutt.
And we're from the Daily Music Business Podcast. We're joined by a number of other really great hosts in creating daily content with great advice for independent musicians just like you.
That's right. We put out episodes daily on all topics from music marketing to branding, advice on signing with a manager and label, and anything else you need to up-level the business side of your music career. We've got it covered.
Subscribe to the Daily Music Business Podcast today on your favorite podcast catcher.
Subscribe today to the Daily Music Business Podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
It honestly is. It's a somewhat, I say newer. It's really, probably a 6 or so year thing. But I've been playing for a long time, and I do the Chasing Tone podcast with Wampler, and all this time I've been talking to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is sounding kind of weird around 7K or whatever," and I'm like, "I know low and high and mid. I don't know what 7K sounds like. I might be able to tell you, oh, there's something in the low mids or the high, I don't really like what's going on there." But I didn't have the language to explain it until I started mixing. And I could actually look at an EQ and go you sweep it across. If you're hearing something you don't like, you take and you boost everything and sweep it and find the frequency you don't like, and maybe you can dip it out instead of having to redo your entire rig and completely record the track. You can do a little surgery sometimes and find those things that are disagreeing with you, or maybe something you'd like to hear more of, and just give it a little bit of extra. But you have to know what those numbers are referring to sonically. Otherwise they're just numbers, and they don't, in conversations, they don't mean a lot. But now I know what 7K sounds like. I understand what that means, and my whole family gets annoyed at me when I'm like, who mixed this? What's going on? There's some weird thing going on at 12K. They're like, shut up.
Yeah. Now you can be that guy making them think, like, what's he talking about? I should know.
What's he talking about? Yeah, and I'm far, 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 far from an expert at it, but now I get the concept and have some of the language to be able to explain what I'm hearing versus thing over there, I don't like it.
Yeah, but it's always all about context, isn't it? It's how loud something is depends on how loud was the thing just before it. Do you know what I mean? Right. And that's why music is so brilliant and so difficult to pin down, because it's a dynamic thing, and designing pedals and working on circuits, it's really important to remember that you're not dealing with a consistent sine wave that's a single frequency, single amplitude. You're dealing with this kind of crazy dynamic thing that's has these kind of big transients and crazy kind of frequency stuff going on, and that, I think that's kind of great that you theory is super useful and really important and will get you there much quicker. But in the end, I think everybody has to use their ears and be guided be guided by that, which I think is kind of great. It's a real kind of leveler.
It is, yeah, because there's things on paper that should work, and then you hear them back and they don't.
Yeah.
It's like, but it says in this book that should work this way. It's like, well, in the context of this noise rock band, it doesn't, but maybe that would work well in jazz, but it doesn't work in, this AC/DC style rock and roll thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Because in different types of music, you're also doing different things to different parts of the frequency spectrum. A guitar is not necessarily a guitar, depending on the band and the recording equipment and what they're doing with it.
Yeah, even the guy playing it, how hard is he hitting
it? how hard are they hitting it? Are they bending? Like, what are they doing? What strings are they using? How old are the strings? Oh man, the anything can impact it. It's really wild, and that's why, like you said, at the end of the day, you have to use your ears and do the best you can to dial it in that way, because not everything always makes sense the way we would like it to.
Yeah, and I think I can go a bit crazy sometimes trying to think about how big that range is from somebody with a 50s Strat and a light touch to somebody with kind of active EMGs with a 7-string, and I think, oh God, I want them all to be able to plug into this pedal, and I want it to sound good for everybody. And then you have to kind of sit back and say, well, look, it's a drive pedal. It's never going to please everybody. Just make it good enough for the guys that you're trying to make it for, and don't worry about everyone else. And then inevitably somebody with a 7-string will plug it in and use it, and in a way that you didn't think, that you didn't intend it to be used, and they'll love it, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think that the original concept for the Tube Screamer was to like tighten up the front end of 5150s. But guess what? Like, everybody does that now. So it's and these two, like, all the coolest things that come out of music gear, almost all the coolest things have been musicians going like, well, that's one way to do it, but what if we just turn it all the way up? And, what if we break it? Like, what if we slash the speaker? What if we, oh, that's malfunctioning. That console's malfunctioning, but that's actually a really rad sound. I think we should use that. It sometimes is the thing that went wrong that we actually demand. I mean, that's the whole rock and roll sound, right? Is distortion. That was not supposed to happen. But now we are making pedals to make it happen.
The small speaker overdrive thing I was talking about, using these small amps in the studio, in kind of early 70s, Clapton or Duane Allman, late 60s, early 70s, going into the studio with a tweed champ that was already 15 years old, and I bet reps for Fender amps were tearing their hair out because they're like, we've got these new Silverface twins. Look, these are amazing. They sound beautiful. Why are you going in the studio with this old amp that was only ever for students? It's for people learning guitar. But they figured out they could get this great sound, and that amp plus this microphone plus this desk and these other things, would add up to something really amazing.
100%. Well, dude, we are approaching the end of the podcast, and I do have the classic questions I like to wrap this up on. But before I do, I like to give the guests a chance to take the floor. You can shout out anybody you want to shout out. Say hi to your grandma. You can plug anything you want to plug. The floor is yours. You can do whatever you want right now.
Oh, wow. I'm not prepared for this at all. Well, I've already told you about my new pedal, which I'd like everyone to go and check out and get interested in, and also just get in touch with me. Let me know what you think, because that's the best bit for me, being in touch with people. And I suppose I should shout out Joe and Guitar Nerds podcast for putting us in touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but no, I don't think I've got anything to say that really need to. Other than come find me on Instagram and say hello.
Beautiful. Perfect. All right, David, here we go. First question. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
TR2 Tremolo.
Ooh, the TR2.
Probably
that's a surprisingly popular poll on that question.
Yeah, it's probably the first good guitar pedal I ever owned. The first guitar pedal I ever owned was a Rock Tech Metalworker, which is a very plastic, it's sort of a bad Boss HM2 clone that as a kind of 11-year-old, I went into a guitar shop and said, have you got something that will make me sound like Jimi Hendrix? And the clerk in the store, I don't know whether he was just messing with me, because that pedal does not make you sound like Jimi Hendrix, or he knew that that's probably all I could afford at the time. Sold me a Rock Tech Metalworker. But a TR2 Tremolo is the first good pedal I bought myself, and I still have it.
TR2 is a great pull. It does the thing perfectly. You could throw it off a building, it's still going to work. And TR2 is great. Good pull. All right, final question. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh, that's painful, because I've just had to go on a gluten-free diet, and
oh
pizza.
No. I'm so sorry.
Pizza is really the one thing that is irreplaceable. Do you know what? I really like, I don't know the name of it, the Italian pizza they do, which has like the artichokes, like artichokes from a jar, and ham and mushrooms on it.
That sounds nice.
It's amazing. Yeah. Or anything with anchovies.
Oh, you're an anchovy guy.
Mm.
So anchovies, I've only had a couple experiences with them in all of my pizza explorations. And the times I have, maybe the places were just putting too many on there, I felt like this is all I can taste.
Yeah.
And I love fish. I do. I eat a lot of fish, but I was like, all I can taste is anchovy. Where's the rest of the pizza?
Yeah.
But maybe there's something I'm missing. Like, do you have a particular spot or something to look for when it comes to anchovies, or are you just a big fan and you go to town?
No. I think a little goes a long way. It's a very salty little fish, and
it is.
You probably. I think generally, like when you have really good pizza, I think there's often a lot less on it than you. If you're making it yourself, you throw too much on there and it doesn't work. But really good pizza is quite sparing with the ingredients.
Yeah, a lot more balanced.
So you can taste that lovely gluten-filled bread that tastes so good.
sorry to torture you. I apologize.
That's okay.
I've had to go on spells where I've had to limit the gluten myself, and it was all I could say is I was just thankful I didn't have to limit dairy, because I basically live on cheese. So that would have been a rough time.
I know one thing at times cheese. Okay, but yeah, beer and pizza. I mean, yeah, it's tough.
Well, hopefully it's not forever.
Yeah.
Introduce it back here at some point. Well, dude, thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for letting me check out the new pedal. And I'll pop that clip there in the conversation somewhere so that people can, it's not very long, but so people can hear what we were talking about exactly. And no, it's not the best playing. It's not the best clip in the world, but I think it gets the point across. So hopefully people can have some context there.
Brilliant. Thank you.
We'll slide over to Patreon and see what kind of shenanigans we can get into. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Sounds good. All right, everybody. For David, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All righty, folks. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you go check out Great Eastern Effects, and make sure you check out the XO. It is a really genuinely fun pedal that lets you squeeze new sounds out of things that you already have. And, what's more fun than rediscovering effects that you kind of decided you were done with? The XO can breathe new life into your rig, and I really, really like it. And this sounds like it's an ad. It's not. This is genuinely how I feel. I get real worked up about this stuff sometimes. Anyway, make sure you check out Great Eastern Effects on the website. And if you want more with David, we get into some music journalism type stuff. Going back into his mental archives from when he was working at those magazines, I had some questions for him. So we dive into that over on Patreon, where for just $5 a month, you can support this show and help keep this thing going and get extra content beamed to your ears every week. And I cannot tell you, folks, it is enormous. It is so helpful. It literally got me through the COVID times. So thank you to everybody who does that. Thank you to everybody who has ever thought about doing that. And thank you to you for spending all this time and listening to this point. I really appreciate you. Tell a friend. If you're not in a position to do Patreon, please tell a friend about this episode or any other episode that you really enjoyed. That would mean the world to me. All right, folks, I got to do some stuff. Without further ado, I'm going to jet. Bye. I always say that without further ado when I'm going to leave. It's just so dumb. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Hey everyone, this is Tuck from Fit for a King, an off-road minivan. Every week I bring you fun interviews alongside your favorite metalcore entertainers with my new podcast, Get Tucked. Join me every Monday with bands like Counterparts, Crystal Lake, like Moths to Flames, and many more. We play unsigned and undiscovered bands, deep dive into each artist's history, and of course provide the greatest breakdowns in current metalcore. Tune in to Get Tucked every Monday, out now through Sound Talent Media.
This is Krista Makes, guitarist and vocalist for Less Than Jake, and host of Krista Makes a Podcast, a songwriting podcast where every week I'm joined by an amazing guest to break down the writing, recording, and release of one iconic song from their career. In our giant evergreen back catalog of episodes, we've had rock legends such as Dee Snider and Huey Lewis, punk rock favorites like Mark Hoppus, Fat Mike, and Brett Gurewitz, and up-and-coming artists of today such as Liz Stokes of the Beths and Genesis Owusu. We've had guests from all genres and styles of music, and I guarantee that if you peruse our back catalog, you'll see several episodes that'll make you say, man, I gotta hear that. Whether you're a fan of music or a creator of music yourself, you'll take away a whole new appreciation for the songs you know and love. Krista Makes a Podcast is available for free on all the places you could possibly listen to podcasts, and new episodes come out every Monday.